can go to and access any of the past recordings. The recordings are usually up by the following Tuesday. These webinars happen every Thursday evening from 6 to 7 p.m. And of course, you can claim your ethics points via CYPA. If you need to go to the webinars page, you can go to webinars.dociohealth.co.za. And the topic tonight is actually interesting to anyone that works to make money. Sometimes I think that sometimes hanging on to the money is a little bit more difficult than actually making the money. And I think that comes down to cash flow, it comes down to planning, and it comes down to financial acumen. And I think more importantly than that, it often comes down to having the right people behind you to assist you with those things. And tonight we have Ruvan Grobler from Bovest Wealth Management, who himself is an investment and wealth manager there. And they work specifically with healthcare professionals to do exactly that. They work with them to plan their wealth and their portfolios, to mitigate their risk. And tonight he's going to discuss the 5 common mistakes that healthcare professionals make. So also, one last note before we get started. At the end of the session, Ruvan is going to share he's going to share a QR code where you can get a free consultation with him and his team, which I think is well worth it. And so, let's carry on. Ruvan, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Evening to all the participants. Thank you for the introduction. And of course, big pleasure to be the headline sponsor of this series. I'm sure all the participants are extremely excited to hear what you've been doing wrong with your finances. I'm sure on a Thursday evening, this is exactly what you wanted to do. So welcome. And let's get straight into it. Let's go to the next slide. So my name is Ruvan Grobler. I'm a wealth manager and head of risk at Bovest Wealth Management. I've been working with medical professionals for the past 8 years, of the PGDIP in financial planning from the University of the Free State, and the RFP designation from the Financial Planning Institute. Bovest, we currently manage portfolios of around 400 families. This is well over 1,000 individuals, and more than 2.5 billion rand in assets under advice. But we focus on planning, not on selling financial products. For us, it's about planning. We do comprehensive planning together with external partners. We've got external partners in law, tax, and of course, accounting. For us, client education is quite important to us. Webinar series like this, I think really does give you the tools to flourish. You can see on my slide as well, we've got an international presence, many clients overseas, many expats, and many clients working overseas. So let's move on to the next slide. So just in short, why do we actually work with medical professionals? Medicine is a profession, built on precision. And I like precision, to be honest. But every diagnosis is guided by evidence. Every treatment plan carefully considered, and every decision weighted against risk and long-term outcomes. Years of training sharpen the ability to see what others miss and to act with clarity and under pressure. Financial life, however, really follows the same rules, unfortunately. But for many doctors, career success arrives quickly. Demands everything: long hours, emotional energy, constant professional development, and your income grows, and of course responsibilities as well. Financial decisions are then made, between consultations, theatre lists, family commitments, and so forth. The intention always, of course, is to deal with it later when things slow down. But that normally does not happen. We've seen that quite a bit. But financial planning doesn't wait, for free time. It unfolds quietly in the background, shaped by your habits, structures, and decisions made by default rather than by design. So, over time, we see a number of patterns emerge among medical professionals. These are not, reckless mistakes or signs of poor judgment. In fact, they're often the result of being responsible, hardworking, focus on the right priorities and patients and the practice and family and so forth. Yet those small financial inefficiencies repeated over years can have an outsized impact. The challenge is that they really feel urgent in the moment, of course. Let's look at what I'll be looking at, the 5 mistakes, like we call it, the 5 common financial mistakes that doctors make. And I'm not going to go into absolute depth with each. I think it does speak for itself, and I think you'll see the way that I want you to think about your own finances and the type of things to look out for and the type of questions to ask for if you haven't in the past, of course. And the first one is cash heavy. The second one, paying too much tax without, of course, realizing it. The third one, offshore exposure. And I ask the question, is it opportunity or an overreaction? The fourth being paying everyone else first, and you'll see exactly what that means. And then the fifth, using the wrong investment structures. So, of course, every single one of these issues, they have an outcome. And this whole webinar or my part of the webinar, like I said, it's just to make you think about. Think about it a little bit more analytical than you think or you actually want, to be honest. Okay, so let's get right into it. So cash heavy. Now, what does that mean? So holding large cash balances is often seen as prudent. You make lots of cash. It's liquid, it's familiar, low stress. But for doctors with volatile workloads and private practices, this obviously especially feels comforting. But what's the problem? Cash is one of the most tax inefficient assets for higher earners. While interest income enjoys modest annual exemptions, anything above the threshold is taxed at your marginal rate. For many doctors, this means a significant portion of, let's call it, the safe interest returns never actually reach them. Add inflation into the mix, and the real after-tax, after-inflation return on that excess cash is quietly, probably turning negative. So, I always say cash does have a role, but without intention and limits, it often becomes a silent drag on the long-term wealth. So the interest rate on cash is mostly linked to interest rates set by the Monetary Policy Committee of the South African Reserve Bank. These rates are a tool used by the Reserve Bank to manage inflation. So if interest rates are cut, interest earned on your cash will also be lower, of course. On the flip side of the coin, lower rates is good if you have debt. So meaning that it physically actually costs you less to borrow money. And just a note, the MPC actually had a meeting this afternoon and decided to keep the prime interest rate at 10.25%. So if you have cash physically in the bank, you'd probably be smiling. And if you have lots of debt, you're not smiling at this right moment. But anyway, so, you can also say, 2 million rand as an example, sitting in cash, earning 6%, versus a properly structured long-term portfolio at 10%. The difference over 20 years can literally be 6 to 8 million rand. That's a lot of money, and you have to look at it in the long term. And if you specifically look at my slide here, these exemptions that is talked about here at the top, there it is specifically. If you're under the age of 65, the first 23,800 rand of your interest income is exempt. And if you're over 65, 34,500. So, many times I try to make people see on, black and white, what happens. So just a quick example. This example is probably a little bit old. You won't get that bank rate anymore, especially with that amount, but this is just an example. So the amount is R1 million over a term of 5 years, and the bank gives you 10.45% interest. Pre-tax after 5 years, that's R1.522 million. Now, that still needs to be taxed, of course. So your rate after tax, if you are taxed at 20%, as an example, that after tax rate is 7.02%. So that only leaves you then with actually 1.418 million. Let's go down to the next one. So the rate after 30% tax, that would leave you with after tax rate of 6.14%. And that would leave you then closer to 1.36 million after tax. And then probably where many doctors find themselves in the 40% marginal tax rate or close to it, then that 10.45% goes down to 5.26 after tax, which would then be 1.313 million. So, that's close to 200,000 Rand in taxes. So, on paper, usually it looks great. Okay, the bank will give you this and that. And I'm saying the bank, it could be any type of investment company that can give you fixed interest, or a fund that can give you fixed interest, or money market, whatever it might be. But that is pre-tax. You don't see it at that exact moment, but when you need to do your taxes, you'll see that you have to pay in a bit of money. Okay, and that's where it comes from. So after tax, the picture definitely looks a bit different. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, next one, paying too much tax without realizing it. So it actually talks a bit about the previous issue as well, but we go into a little bit more detail. So, you'll see this looks quite intense, and I'll get to that in a second. But doctors are among the most heavily taxed professionals in South Africa. Yet, tax planning is often treated as a once in a year exercise, rather than an integrated strategy. The issue isn't usually under-reporting, it's under-structure. That's the issue. Different investment vehicles are taxed in different ways. Interest earnings, capital gains tax, dividend withholding tax. And, doesn't just affect returns, this definitely compounds over time. With two portfolios with the same gross return can end up worlds apart after tax if they structure differently. When investment decisions are made in isolation, without considering tax and time horizon and state implications, the cost isn't obvious in year one. It shows up quietly over decades. It definitely compounds. And this is where, once again, we can go into the slide. But let's compare. There's a lot going on there, but let's compare. It's quite clear. When we look at the different conventional investment structures on the slide, it's daunting. We haven't even started looking at returns. We're only talking about implications, tax implications, estate implications, liquidity, and so forth. We have not even started to look at returns. Let's use an example in terms of tax implications. Start at the top with unit trusts. Tax implication, of course, CGT on sale or switches. If you move out of assets that can have a capital gain, there might be a tax implication, whether it be just a sale to move to a different asset or a sale to withdraw cash. And of course, interest, the interest earnings, just like we saw on the previous issue. But if you look at the different structures, let's look at the structure just underneath it, an endowment, so a wrapped investment. It's taxed inside of the product, so inside of the structure, outside of your personal income tax, and fixed rates. So the CGT is capped at, or not capped, sorry, it's a flat rate of 12%, and the income is a flat rate of 30%. So in terms of your own personal income tax rates, you'll see there's a difference. So every single structure works differently. Let's move all the way down to tax-free savings account. What is the tax implications? There's no tax implications, not a single tax implication. The only implication there can be is if you go over the yearly or the lifetime limit. So, of course, your yearly limit is 36,000 Rand in terms of contributions, 500,000 over your lifetime. If you contribute more than 36,000 for the year, you'll have a penalty of 40%. That penalty comes directly from SARS. So, to a certain extent, you would pay not really tax, but it's a penalty if you go over those yearly annual contributions. So what do you need to do? You definitely need to split investment capital between different structures. Once again, as you can see, it's taxed differently. Each structure should have a goal or an investment horizon. And too much capital in a unit trust or flexible investment as above will increase interest earnings and capital gains tax in your personal name. Solution, of course, work out how much liquidity you need and invest the rest in a more tax efficient structure with the long term, of course, in mind. Something like the wrapped investment or an annuity, retirement annuity, and so forth. But you need to look at what is the liquidity that you need in your specific portfolio. What is your own needs in terms of emergency funds, in terms of your own lifestyle and the type of things that will be payable should you need cash. So that's what I mean when I say work out how much liquidity you need, and the rest you should invest for the long term. Let's go to the next slide. Offshore exposure, definitely very topical, and very topical in the news, and very topical in terms of influences out there on social media. Definitely in the headlines, certain big names making big claims, probably for the last 15 years or so. But my question is opportunity or overreaction? Global diversification is of course important. Offshore exposure can reduce concentration risk and definitely unlock opportunities that aren't available locally in South Africa. However, many investors move money offshore without a clear strategy. That's the problem. And this is often driven by headlines and fear, currency anxiety, and not done with the long term in mind and long-term planning in mind, or even looking at your own family situation. Who will actually inherit these offshore investments? Is there actually someone to inherit the investments and those structures? If there's not someone that will inherit it overseas, can it come back? It does become quite intricate. So how much can you invest offshore? The South African tax residents, we have an annual single discretionary allowance, as we call it. It's R1 million, and it requires no approval from SARS or the Reserve Bank. So there's R1 million that you can physically take out of the country. A further R10 million may also be taken offshore that same calendar year, but this does require the approval. So there's many questions that must be answered and information that must be gathered for them to give you the approval. Of course, indirect exposure is also possible. You can do this via feeder funds or even local equity business exposure. So you don't have to do it in the physical sense of taking cash out of the country. You can still keep your cash in South Africa. Something that would be good for is liquidity, especially if you need liquidity. But once again, that's where the planning comes in. Some of the key questions that are frequently overlooked: how much offshore exposure is actually appropriate for your situation? It's not the same for everyone, and that's why I asked the question: your own family, is there actually someone that can inherit it that is overseas? Do you want to bring it back? It's a big discussion. Which structures are the most efficient? How does this affect tax, liquidity, future repatriation? Exactly what I said now. And is CITES tax payable? So CITES is estate duty or death tax payable in offshore jurisdiction. Is that payable? Because that could be a big issue. And probably one of the things that I've seen people not think about is, do you need an offshore will? If you take money out of the country, who is going to make sure that that money actually is part of your estate or part of your global estate or whatever it might be? That becomes quite an issue as well. Something to think about. So South Africa, you'll see once again a lot going on here, and this is one of those graphs that you can look at for quite a long time. It's quite interesting, but it gives you perspective of how small we are in the greater scheme of things. And when I say we, I mean we as South Africans in the global economy. So we're just about 0.4% of the global GDP. So offshore investing isn't a binary decision. The value lies in how, where, and through what structure exposure is obtained. Not simply moving the money abroad. There's many things to be answered. Just a few examples. I've seen a doctor take every single cent of his investment portfolio directly offshore, and it was because of sensationalist headlines. Even his emergency savings went into dollars. Now, that leaves you with very little liquidity and of course, no flexibility, and it doesn't fit into the long-term plan. But the fear pushed him to do that. I've also seen a situation where an elderly woman, after her husband had passed, she was required to sign in person for an investment that her husband made in the UK. That seems shocking. The correct structure would definitely have given her the option to continue with the investment in her own capacity, or of course try and bring back that capital to South Africa without physically having to be there. I can promise you that the flights to the UK would probably, depending on who you ask, not be wouldn't have been the right thing to do anyway. All right. Okay, this is an interesting one for me. Paying everyone else first. So this is more of a, I think, an emotional thing, and it's just a way of thinking and something to maybe change in your own life. Doctors are natural caregivers. Practices, staff, patients, families. Everyone's needs comes first, and personal savings often come last. And the data is clear. South African domestic saving rates, obviously, it remains worryingly low. Even among high earners, inconsistent or delayed personal investing is common. And the risk isn't actually lifestyle inflation; it's time, especially for doctors. Missed early contributions can't be recovered later. No matter how high income becomes, the compounding actually, rewards consistency, not intention. So consistency over a long term. Paying yourself first isn't about sacrifice. It's about ensuring today's success, translates into the future independence. Something like being able to retire, for example. So, paying everyone else first is a common problem when a budget is not followed. Okay, so that is one of the issues that a budget can actually sort out. A business cannot function without a budget, and the same is true for your personal finances. And it's actually really easy. Simply use the 50-30-20 principle when setting up your budget. How does it work? Okay, let's go into that quickly. Okay, so 50% of your expenses go towards the need to have expenses. So that's your bond, food, medical aid, school fees, fuel, insurance, all of these types of things. What's next? 30%. So 30% of your expenses must go towards your investment portfolio. Build long-term wealth. So this must be done before you spend a cent on anything else. You know, you're actually paying your future self first. And what's left is the 20%, and that's spending money. So everything else is covered. Your kids' school fees, everything was already covered in the 50%. You can eat, you have insurance, you can travel to work and home and so forth. Everything is sorted, then investments, and then the rest. And it's really easy. And actually, by using this method, it's also easy to determine if you can actually afford that new home or car. If it doesn't fit into that 50% portion of your expenses, then you actually simply can't afford it. So it's actually a very, very good planning tool. And I just spoke about the savings, and let's talk about the delay. Let's talk about the delay in paying yourself first. Let's take two doctors. Let's use two examples. Similar careers. Dr. A starts investing 15,000 Rand a month at age 30, continues until age 40. So that's 10 years. And then stops contributing. But he leaves the money invested, of course, but he stopped contributing entirely. Dr. B delays saving, focus on practice expenses and family commitments and all of these things. But then at age 40, starts investing that 15,000 per month, just like Dr. A, and continues that all the way until age 65. Okay, so that's 25 years of contributions for Dr. B. Dr. A was 10 years of contributions. Now, assuming, of course, the same long-term return, Dr. A can still end up with more money at retirement than Dr. B, despite investing for less than half the time. That's literally how it works. And that's a power of compounding. And the earlier you start, the better. So even after Dr. A stopped contributing and only contributed for 10 years, he did it much earlier than Dr. B. And that made obviously a big difference. Okay. Okay. So also I think in the panel discussion I mentioned retirement. The lack of personal financial planning in medical professionals does really catch up. And when is that? It does at retirement. If you think that selling your practice, of course, if you can, is enough to fund your retirement, you need to think again, especially if you want to maintain your lifestyle. That's definitely something to think about. So put as much away as you can, when you can, and especially while you have the money and while you are working. Right. Brings me to my next slide, using the wrong investment structures. Now, of course, this can get really intense, so I won't go too deep into it. Let's keep it, let's say light, but this isn't very light. But this is arguably the most expensive mistake, and the least visible. So many doctors accumulate, investments across multiple platforms, policies, accounts. It doesn't matter, but each decision may have made sense, obviously in isolation, but together they can create inefficiencies. So many times when we see decisions made where there wasn't someone to help or someone like me to guide, you see decisions being made about structures and new investments in isolation. You can't look at an investment portfolio in isolation. There's too many moving parts. And some of these moving parts, of course, tax, access to funds, estate planning, intergenerational transfer. There's so much to think about. It can't be looked at in isolation. Now, the structure holding the investment often matters as much as the investment itself. Over a 20 or 30-year horizon, the difference between adequate and optimal, that structuring can be substantial, even if the underlying returns are physically identical. the structure made the difference. You know, a client of mine passed away last year, unfortunately. And a few years ago, we revised the investment structures. Immediately, I saw an opportunity to save money. I moved a portion of a discretionary investment portfolio into a more estate planning and tax-friendly structure. Now, this move saved the state about 300,000 rand. In what? In executors' fees. So saved the 300,000 rand in executors' fees just by looking at the structuring. Beneficiaries also had access to these funds within a month of her passing without having to wait for the winding up of the estate. Now, specifically on the estate planning, my colleague PJ Botha, he will go into more depth specifically on estate planning. This will be on the 12th of Feb. So keep that in mind. Well, that's really interesting. You'll see some of the decision making in our line of work. Let's look at the next part. Okay, so of course, an individual, you know, who's looking for short-term liquidity, like emergency funds, they'd be better off using an open structure, you know, like a flexible investment or unit trust, like we saw on the previous slides. You know, retirement annuity or a wrapped investment, that would definitely not be appropriate for liquidity. On the other hand, you know, long-term risk in growth assets where no liquidity is needed would definitely be better suited for a wrapped investment or annuity. So you see there where the different type of structures come in. This is one of those scenarios as well. You can see here where the difference in structure literally gave the person millions. So that's close to 8 million rand over 11 years just by being in the correct structure. So the yellow line, that would be cash in the bank. The white line would be fixed income. So that would be, as an example, cash and bonds or multi-asset or anything like that, but interest-bearing. And then, of course, the final, the top one, you'll see that is in a retirement annuity. So many, I would say, misconceptions around a retirement annuity. Once again, my colleague PJ will go more into the detail about that and how you can really use that for estate planning. But in my scenario here, you'll see, of course, that the retirement annuity, all growth inside of the structure is tax-free. Okay, so there you can see there's quite a big difference over 11-year cycle. And of course, inside of the retirement annuity, if you're not paying taxes on capital gains and so forth, then it does make sense to take a bit more risk, of course, if you're not paying tax on those gains. Okay, so you know, in conclusion, I'm leaving that there up there for a second before I get to the QR code. You know, just to put everything into final perspective, you know, individually, you know, none of these issues seem extremely dramatic, but holding extra cash, choosing a familiar investment, delaying personal contributions for another year, you know, each decision feels reasonable in isolation. But the real impact only becomes visible when viewed over time, and as part of a bigger picture. You know, financial planning is really about finding, you know, magic investment or predicting markets and all of these things. More often, it's about alignment, ensuring that income, and the tax strategy, and the structures, offshore exposure, and all your goals are working together, rather than pulling it in, you know, in different directions. Everything should be looking at the same picture. You know, and doctors understand better than most. You know, it's small, consistent advantages in the right areas need to significantly better outcomes over the long run. And the same principle applies to wealth. Tiny inefficiencies compound just as powerfully as well-structured decisions do as well. Okay, so, you know, the difficulty is not in intelligence or discipline with doctors. You have both in abundance. The difficulty is complexity is something that you don't work with every day. Modern financial landscapes are layered and technical and constantly evolving, and legislation and so forth. So, without a coordinated strategy, even high earners with strong saving habits can definitely fall short of what would have been possible with a more integrated approach. So you can see on the slide, we've got three offices. Our head office actually is in Pretoria, where I'm also situated most of the time. We also have a office in Stellenbosch and an office in George, both of which have horrible weather, much better in Pretoria. There you can see that's our general office number and general office email. Website www.bovest.co.za. And of course, as Ryan said earlier, you're welcome to scan the QR code. Ryan, this QR code will actually go to you, not to our system. Just a note. I'll leave that up for a few seconds. Ryan, is there any questions from the participants?
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. I really appreciate the presentation this evening. It's been interesting, and I think that from me, I've already got a question. What is, when you think of a financial planner, people are often hesitant. They're afraid. They're embarrassed. Sometimes our financials don't look the way that we want them to. And so what are the practical steps to coming to a financial planner? What do we come to you with? How does it work?
So, like I said, normally, most people already have some sort of a portfolio. That's starting point. So normally, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you are. So we need to look at exactly what's going on. And then it's very important to sort of make a roadmap. We need to set up goals. It's extremely important. That's what financial planning is. Financial planning used to be selling policies and, selling wrapped endowments and taking upfront commissions. And it doesn't work like that. It's about planning. And it's sort of, like you said as well, some people feel sort of, I don't have a big portfolio already. That doesn't matter. You need to start somewhere. And if you start it the right way from the start, you're going to be much better off. And sometimes it's not even about all of these intricacies around legislation and taxes and liquidity and estate planning and so forth. Sometimes it's also an emotional thing. We provide guidance. Sometimes we are just there to listen, and sometimes I'm there to say, no, please don't do that. So lots of guidance is I think the main theme.
Okay. When a doctor comes to you for the first time, what usually surprises them about their finances then?
Yeah, good question. So, I think most doctors that I've met, they've done many of the right things already. They have investments, retirement products, maybe some offshore exposure, cash reserves. So on the surface, it looks good. It looks solid. There's a couple of million to look over. But when we map everything out together, they often realize, no one has ever actually looked at how all the pieces fit together. That's something that I spoke about a few times during the presentation. You can't look at everything in isolation. The total picture needs to be looked at, and that's also why I have an internal team and, of course, an external team as well. So that's where the external partners come in, lawyers and tax and accounting. So where I fall short in a certain space where I am not the specialist, I bring in the specialist so that we make sure that the total picture is looked at, and everything isn't looked at in isolation. I'm a very analytical person, so I like to put things in boxes. but all of these boxes need to go somewhere. They need to fit these puzzle pieces. They need to make one big picture, and that's where we sometimes need a bit of help.
I think that's the strength of coming to a financial planner. Uh, I, I've got an interesting question here from one of the audience members. They've asked here, many friends around a bra place have advice, and we know that all too well, and that can be dangerous sometimes. Uh, and this is so relevant to a lot of those conversations. Should one rather buy property rather than invest in annuities, and possibly bigger than annuities? But this question is specifically asked about annuities.
Yeah, so I think it's always very um, be careful about listening to people around the bride. I've always had that conversations where someone says, no, they bought this and this and this, and they made 200% over the last 5 years. But they never tell me about their losses. Always remember that. So money is emotional. Speaking about people about finances is emotional. Don't listen to the brouwvleis too much. Speak to people who know what they're talking about. You know, I speak to asset managers every single day of my life. I speak to every single big asset manager every single day of my life. I have the tools and the people around me that gives me more information than you would even read, in the financial mail. So there's a lot going on. It's really intricate, and simply saying around the briar, talking about that one win that you had, that's probably won't cut it actually. But speaking about the property and annuities and so forth, look, there's place for everything. Once again, that's where the planning comes in. Once again, make sure it's the correct decision regarding property. I think there's lots of moving parts there as well. Moving parts with liquidity, tenants, maintenance, all of these types of things. So lots to think about, but definitely there's place for both. And of course, the area that you want to buy a place, and it obviously makes a big difference. But there's definitely place for both.
So everything carries risk. It depends on your risk appetite. It depends on your liquidity and all those other aspects that you were mentioning.
Definitely, absolutely.
How is financial planning for doctors different from other professionals then?
Yeah, so doctors actually have a few, unique dynamics that make the planning, I think, a little bit more specialized. Firstly, I think the income patterns can be unusual, especially for those in private practice, and earnings can be high, but sometimes irregular, and often tied to the business expenses and equipment, staff, and all of these types of things. And that makes cash flow planning more complex, I think, than a standard salaried employee or job. So it does take a bit of planning. I think secondly, doctors are typically in higher tax brackets. So for most of their careers, which means I think structuring is definitely helpful, or not helpful. I think it's critical. Let me say that again. The way the investments are held can make a meaningful difference to long-term outcomes, as we've seen in the rest of the presentation. But one thing I think people also don't think about, and I actually also didn't think about it until I spoke to someone about it. Doctors spend years studying, and building careers. So serious wealth accumulation, often starts a bit later than in other professions, or in other professions. And that makes efficient planning and proper structures even more important, because time becomes, a real valuable resource. You've probably started a bit later, so we really need to focus.
So to circle back to that initial question that I was asking you, when does someone come to someone like Bovis Wealth Management? Do they come to you once they've accumulated some wealth, or do they come to you when they're starting out their private practice, and they haven't started with their money yet? They're possibly even in debt, or when do they come to you? Is the first part of the question. And secondly, one of the questions that are in the Q&A forum there, what does your fee structure look like? How does that work?
Yeah, so who can come to Bovest? You know, anyone can come. We obviously do have certain criteria that must be met. You know, even if you are a doctor, we really prefer people that take their finances seriously. And it's not about being funny. That's just it makes my life easier, and it will probably make your life easier as well. So, you know, I definitely prefer a certain client, and you must always remember, you know, when working with people, working with clients, sometimes people don't fit with each other, and that's fine. You know, it's absolutely fine. Um, but like I said, we do normally prefer people that take their finances a bit more serious. So we have minimums around the capital that can be invested, and if you want to invest monthly, there's certain minimums. Obviously, depending on the total portfolio. But what I would normally say is let's have a chat first, see what's going on, look at what you have. Like I said, we need to look at what you have before we can decide where you need to go. Um, but yeah, that's the first. What was your second question?
What does your
The
fee
fee
structure look
structure.
like? How does that work?
Sorry, yes, fee structure. So in terms of how we work, we've got a few different ways in which we work. We sometimes can leave certain things open for discussion. Um, but we do have a fee structure if we're talking about investments specifically around the assets under advice. It is a sliding scale. So of course, the more assets that's under our advice, the lesser the fee, of course. But that's obviously something we can discuss. We also do certain planning where we only do invoice planning. So we won't charge you an annual fee and these types of things. We can do, you know, once-off um, transaction or whatever. But of course, we prefer to have annual fees. We never take upfront fees. That's not part of our business. We feel that you first need to do something before you can earn the money. So we do not do upfront fees specifically on investments at all. Um, so yeah, but it is open for discussion depending on the situation.
Okay, fantastic. I think that clears everything up. Uh, I think unless anyone else has any further questions that they'd like to post in the Q&A forum, I think let me just have a look and make sure. Uh, yeah, look, I think that there's another question. How much do you need to retire with comfortably in 5 years, 20 or 30 million? I think that some of the questions you this isn't a financial planning session. I think that
Yeah,
Ruben, I don't know if you agree, but these are the kind of questions that you have to have with your financial planner. Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, look, I mean, if you'd like to meet with Ruvan, if you'd like to have a chat with his team, scan the QR code, schedule a consult with them. It's a huge favor to be able to chat with them. Um, I think that Ruvan, there's a difference between a bespoke company like Bovest and your financial planner at the bank. And I think that is the difference, the kind of service and the kind of in-depth planning that you're going to get from Bovis Wealth Management. Am I correct?
Absolutely. It's about adding value, and something like this is part of the adding value. Everything is something that I need to justify my fee. And how do I justify my fee is by adding value. And that can be in so many ways. So yes, of course, definitely.
So lastly, what are all the services that Bovest actually offers to their clients? I know that you offer a whole range of services.
Yeah. So the starting point to every relationship is investments. So unfortunately, you can't give me a call and say I need help with my short-term insurance or anything like that. We start with investments. That is the center point of our relationship. And then from there on, then we can do your medical aid, your short-term insurance, your life insurance, your will. We can be the executive of your estate. There's lots to do, but it has to start with the investments. And once again, why? The reason is because if you have capital, you probably take your personal finances seriously. So you are someone that we want to work with. And then, but like I said, so we can do all these other things for you as well. And then we have specialists that specifically work on those pieces of your portfolio. So it's a team. Bovest, if you are a client of mine, as an example, you don't just work with me. You work with Diana, Marizelle, Connie, PJ. There's so many people that you actually work with, and those are only the people I just spoke about. That's internal. There's a whole team external as well. So it's about having a team, many people to bounce ideas from off of as well.
Thank you, Ruan. Well, there was certainly a reason why we decided to partner with Bovest Wealth Management in the series, and I'm very grateful for you sponsoring this whole series. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for the presentation this evening. Again, this is being recorded, so you can access it via our YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Ruan, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Bye-bye, everyone.